Welcome back. I've slightly changed the resolution here. The basic idea is that the raw files are a little too large, which is kind of strange considering that it's not a very intensive game, but I wanted to make sure I could talk a little longer without having to compress all those videos down. Now, as you may remember, we're England. It's 1st of January 1520, and we still have not played a single day, but that's okay, because there's a lot to get through before you can even get started, and once you do, it goes fairly quickly, as anybody who's actually played for a while will let you know. Let's talk about provinces. We've kind of talked about the main menu here, gone over all the things that you can do, but what happens and why kind of comes down to a basic level here to each individual province. Now, when we're England, we have a number of them, about a dozen, I'd say. Mostly the English and Welsh areas of the main British Isles, and Dublin over in Ireland. This is the historical boundaries. We also have the Port of Calais on the coast of France, Flanders, wherever you want to call that. Another historical thing. This is the last English continental thing. They lost everything else in the 100 Years' War to France. So unfortunately, well, actually it's fortunate, because we don't really want to get involved in continental politics. So screw them. Let's take a look at one of our provinces here. London is our capital here, so why not click on this? This opens up the province itself. As we can see, we have the name of the province here, London. The name of the main city in the province, London. In some cases, it's different. For instance, over here in the Marches, Coventry is the main city. And we have all the various stats here about the province, and these are important, but you don't need to get into a huge amount of detail with them most times. The population is the population of the city. The game says that it increases production and tax income. That's not entirely true. The population has very little, if any, effect on the tax income, which is odd, but there you go. Growth is how fast the province is growing, and as with everything, you can hover over and see what's there. In this case, the base growth rate of any province is 3% every 10 years. A marketplace adds 1%. Religious tolerance for whatever religion is in the province adds 4%. In this case, we tolerate Catholics very well. The capital city, obviously, since this is London, gives us an extra. And the national focus, which I'll cover in a minute, also gives us some extra population growth. So London is growing fairly large. It should be huge by the end of the game. The next thing is supply limit. Supply limit is pretty simple. It's how many regiments of troops can be in this province at one time without causing attrition. Since London's a big city, and it's a very nice temperate province, our limit here is 42, which is huge. That would mean we could have 42,000 men camping in London. And this number actually will only go up over time, so it's fairly nice. The downside to a high supply limit is that if somebody takes the province from you, then that's going to be an easy place for them to regroup during a war. You kind of want provinces with low supply limits, because then they really screw over your opponent. However, supply limits are always low for enemies who haven't taken control of the province, so if the enemy was sieging London with 42,000 men, they would be taking attrition. Speaking of attrition, the max attrition is down here. This value is 7. A land province has a base of 5, and England gets mild winters, so it has 7. If we were in, say, Scandinavia or Russia, this number would be much higher. This is basically as high as attrition can go every month. Attrition literally is the percentage of troops in an army that die every month, if you're over the limit. So if they had more troops than they could carry, the max attrition would be 7%, and an army in London would be losing 7% of their entire army every month, which is quite bad, but it gets much worse in places like Russia, which is why you don't want to attack a place like Russia in winter. That's very well modeled here. Revolt Risk is the chance each month that, I think it's actually each year, but it's rolled every month, that the province will rise up in revolt. As we can see, it's 0 right now, which is good because we don't really want them to revolt. We can also hover over to see what kind of reasons and what kind of rebels we'll get. The minimum revolt risk down there at the bottom that can raise up in periods of unrest, things like that, and it may be over 0, which means that there will always be a little revolt risk. In our case, though, it's negative, which means that it's generally going to be 0. The list of things here explains what affects the chance of revolts. We have the Bill of Rights national idea. That's good. It lowers the revolt risk. Our legitimacy is high, so everybody trusts in the government. Our stability is high, so that helps. We have a constable who is a tax collector. People don't like him, so that hurts us a little bit. We have a courthouse, though. People like having a system of justice. We have religious tolerance. That's good. It's our national focus. That helps, too. There's some friendly troops in the province. People don't like to revolt if they think the army's going to put them down, so the army has a good effect on preventing troops. But you can't really spread your armies out everywhere, especially if you're a medium to large-sized country. We have a land enclosure, which is a province modifier I'll talk about. People don't like that, so that's a little high. But as you can see, the bonuses easily outweigh the negatives, so there's no real risk here. The culture is English, as you would expect from London. The same culture group, American and Scottish. There are no Americans this early, obviously. But the Scots are up north, and they're within our culture group. We want provinces that are our culture, ideally, and as a secondary, anything that's in our culture group. So we want all the English provinces, which we already start the game with. We own all the English provinces that exist right now. And we would also like some Scottish provinces, because as it turns out, Scottish is in our group, so they have a very minimal penalty for owning them. Whereas Irish isn't in our group, so we will have a bit of a penalty if we take over Ireland. Manpower is a very important feature. Manpower is how many troops are available, and I've shown up here how they regenerate each month, and they come from each of your provinces. So for instance, London is contributing 1,801 men each year. The base is 1,716, and it gets various modifiers to it. So as you can see, by being in our capital and having national focus, we get 20% more manpower, but we lose 15% from our slider settings, because people don't really like to be in the army as much, in a naval power. You want provinces with high manpower. Often provinces that have the grain resource have high manpower, but not always. Sometimes it's just populated areas, things like that. Below this is the garrison. This is our fort level, which is 2. We get a little extra defense from our prestige, which is nice. You can have up to 10% more defense from 100 prestige, which isn't bad. Garrison is always 1,000 troops times the level of the fort. So we're a level 2 fort, so we have 2,000. You need at least as many men and slightly more than the garrison to be able to really siege very quickly. And fortunately, you would need at least 3,000 men to siege London, which isn't very many, but over time, with more technology and more investment in forts, you can get up to a pretty high number, and then you need to bring in 10,000 people, something along those lines. The province's religion is Catholic, which most of Europe will be at this point. The Reformation hasn't quite started. If it weren't Catholic, we could go down here and send a missionary if we had one, which we don't at the moment. This tells us the chance each year that he will succeed in converting the province, and missionaries will try until they succeed, or until rebels take over the province. But if you make sure to station troops wherever you're trying to convert, that shouldn't be a problem.